In this video I'm going to show you how to take some pieces of steel and turn it into a kayak rack, which can be used on a Jeep like I do or other vehicles as well. So I'll give you all my measurements, but some of these you'll have to adjust for your vehicle if you don't have a Jeep Wrangler. Now I have a Kurt hitch and I haven't measured that and compared it to other hitches, so you'll have to watch out for that. Now the receiver section of this kayak rack is 17 inches. That gave me enough room to use it on the stock size wheels, and then it also allowed me to have more room to change the placement of that hitch pinhole when I went to a larger size tire, which I have on my current Jeep. So for the hitch pin, I put the hole 1.5 inches from the rear of the bar on center, and then to make adjustments for my new custom rims, which I believe are -12 offset, I had to go with 4-inch spacing on center. So that's a 2 by 2 inch bar. On top of that, I use a 1.5 inch upright. So use it 1.5 inch upright, and that obviously sits in the middle of the 2 inch. Now because of it being in off of the edge in the center, I figured this is the highest stress point. Also with the 2 inch square tubing, you would see the open end, and I want to cover that. So when you're looking at the rear of the Jeep, you have an open end of the 2 inch square tubing. I want to cover that, so I was going to cut a plate for that. But the plate I had was 2 by 4. So what I did is I decided to use that as a gusset and a tab to tie those two together. So I welded that on. I also drilled a couple holes to spot weld into the top section of the square tubing, just to practice with the welder and to add more strength. Welded the backside, and then I grinded down the edges to smooth it out, just change the look a little bit. Then also on the other side of the 1.5 inch square tubing, I cut a spare section I had into a triangle, and I welded that in as a gusset in front of it. Now on top of that, I have a 1.5 inch bar, which I call the backbone, and that's what you're going to mount the ribs to, the holders for the actual kayak. Now this upright is set 13 3/4 inches back from the back edge of that backbone. The reason I did this, I wanted the center of the kayak to be roughly centered with the hitch and not with the upright, so that moved everything forward and it wasn't hanging off the rear too far. I also figured this would be a bit of a stress point, so I put a gusset in the front of the upright to the backbone. I took two 2-inch pieces of 2 by 2 square tubing. I added a 28 inch 1 inch square tubing across that. Then I used two 9-inch pieces of 1 inch square tubing, and I put them at about 105 degrees. What I was doing is I wanted to make it easy to get the kayak on in the rear. Originally I was going to make the front narrow so that I'd have it right where I want the kayak to sit. So I just push it against that. It'd be locked in. Without going over, it wouldn't slide off while driving. But I ended up just making them the same for now, and that has worked great. On each end of the ribs, I drilled a hole, put in an eye bolt, bolted that on, and this is my tie down point for my ratchet straps, obviously to hold the kayak down. And then on those bars, I put on the jumbo size pool noodle that pads the bar, keeps from damaging the kayak, but also when you pull it down, it compresses that, and I find it holds it, keeps it from moving. Another thing I did is I drilled holes in the 2-inch square tubing for the ribs through the backbone so that they can be bolted on. With that, I can unbolt them, take it apart, then that rack can be placed against the wall, and then the 2 ribs can be set aside, and also my support, and then it's out of the way. Well, in the hitch, there is some side-to-side movement with the rack. Now to limit some of that, I built a brace for it. Then I took 2 plates here, drilled a hole in them, cut a notch out of one, and that sits on the toe point in the rear of the Jeep. That sits on, welded a nut to the top, bottom plate, put bolts through that, and then I took 1-inch square tubing, the top, made a small tab for it, and then I have a hole and bolts through that. I put a hole through the upright. That hole is sitting about 31¼ inches above the receiver bar. And what it did is I cut my angles. This one here, you almost just have to make it once you get everything set up. I bolted that on, just made some cuts in my bar, bent it. At first I went and kind of got the angles that I wanted, tacked on my 1-inch bar, tacked on a piece here, and then made my cuts. Once I was sitting where I wanted, I welded it together. Now with that on there, there is some movement, it just minimizes that movement. I'm using this for, I believe, almost 5 years now, and it works great. Once it's on, it takes about, say, 5 minutes or so, less than 10 minutes to install in the Jeep. And then once that's on, it takes me a few minutes to put the Kayak on. Just a couple minutes to take it off. You just undo your straps, pull it off the back, and it's very simple to use. So with this rack, I would make sure that the receiver bar is going to fit your application. So what I did to measure my receiver bar, I put a straight edge on the tire and then measured into the back of the hitch, and then gave myself a little more room. Now you only have so much space on the Jeep because you will hit the spare tire, so you have to watch for that. And another thing, I didn't put the upright right against the tire. I thought it would help with movement, but I didn't want that pressure on the tire. I didn't want to wear the side of the tire, but I also didn't want to put stress on the tire carrier itself. That's only cast aluminum. So I left a bit of a gap. I believe it's about, originally it was maybe 1/4 inch or so, and then I used a smaller pool noodle, put that on there to take up some of that gap, and it just absorbs some of that forward rock. But other than that, it's been great. If you have any questions, just ask them down below. And if you like, you can check out the original video on this, which talks a little bit more on why I designed it the way I did. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.